Okay. If we have more technical difficulties tonight, I will let you know. But right out of the gate, you know how it rolls. I'm Erica Lukes, and this is Expanding Frontiers, and I'm happy to be here. I try to be here on a weekly basis, and I know I've thrown some of you off your game because I'm here on Friday nights. Greg Long could not do Friday night, and so we switched the show to Saturday night in the hopes that we could get him. He is still not here yet, and I'm not sure if there is an issue with StreamYard or what's going on, but we hope to have him here later because he is definitely an incredible interview. He's accomplished a lot and has had a lot of behind the scenes goings ons and interactions over the years. He wrote Examining the Earthlight Theory, and that was an exploration into the Yakima Indian reservation and some of the anomalous light phenomena that was going on and that probably still is to this day. So we will keep our fingers crossed and hope that he is here. But we have, and I know this is going to be surprising, Jack Brewer.
Hi, everybody.
I know. Poor Jack is just like, I'm here if you need me. I'm here if you need me. And I'm like, I need you. This is great. We don't know where Greg is. And so Jack is here. And I will definitely say that that is a great thing because Jack and I, who is my partner at expandingfrontiersresearch.org, that is a new nonprofit that we established last fall. But Jack has written great things, the UFO Trail blogspot. You can find him, and he's also written a couple books, which we talked about extensively over the last few years on my show, but specifically since Jack and I really joined forces on the nonprofit. And I wanted to say, if you haven't gone there, you need to go there because the work that we are doing is groundbreaking. It is work that definitely has made a few people uncomfortable. Oh, there's your little buddy. Maybe my little buddy will
Greedy.
join us tonight. And hopefully, Amy in chat will join us because we know that she has a wonderful feline furry creature there. And so, anyway, hi, Michael. Hi, Ken. And I know no voice, but we got that, for a brief moment, we've got that figured out. And Jim, thank you so much. I want to thank Mario again for always being here and Peter for getting the word out on social media. I have such a great support system, and all of you who listen to the show, no matter what day or time it is, are really big influences and very important to me. So thank you for being here. But so UFO John Doe, I want to say that the show was moved to Saturday because Greg has some issues with his work schedule, and so we moved it to Saturday, which is a little bit different for me. But hopefully he will be on shortly. He is not here yet, and that's why I have asked Jack Brewer, who graciously accepted to come on like with 2 minutes before the start of the show. I love it. So anyway, expandingfrontiers.org, you can check it out and look at the groundbreaking research. Like I was saying before, we've done really incredible things, and I'm very proud to say that a couple of the things that we did were the subject of an investigation done by Nate Carlisle, who was with Fox 13 investigative team, and he does an incredible job here in Utah, shining a spotlight on things that are questionable. And I really appreciate him using the hard work that both Jack and I did on that story. So you can check that out if you go to the website and see how uncomfortable we've made people by doing our homework and by using a process that we can all do, doing a grammar request, doing FOIA requests, so we can get information that will give us a little peek behind the scenes, but is public information and shines a different spotlight onto things instead of just saying that here's this narrative that people are giving you that have the intention to make money off of you. They are steering a narrative and, creating a fantasy land for their own pocketbook, to line their own pocketbook. And so use those tools that you have. You can again go to expandingfrontiersresearch.org to look at a brief video that Barry Greenwood, all of you know who've listened to my show, is a UFO historian and archivist, one of the best in the world. And he explains, and Jack, how to use that process that we have available to us. And so I definitely encourage you to do it. So, hey, Lord Ludacris, nice to see you. And Daniel Adams and everybody's. So, Jack, I want to just, now that I've rambled on, because it's like I'm a holy roller, and here I go. But there's a
Roll
question.
on.
I know I'm rolling. I'm rolling on the river tonight. I don't know what's happening. Hey, Tracy, nice to see you. So, I want to ask a question that Peter has for you. So, we'll just get this going right out of the gate. And the question is, you said there was a difference between what Bud Hopkins reported and what Jack discovered with his abductee cases. And so I want to, before we dive into that, for people who don't understand who either of those people are, I think that's important to lay a foundation, because new people come into the show, tune in and go, what? What are we talking about? And so, if you don't mind, Jack, can you just lay out the foundation for Peter's question, and then we can dive into that a little bit?
Sure, sure. I'd like to start, please, by also thanking Mario and Peter and a number of people that support Erica's work and, in effect, my work. And they're really helpful. A lot of people, too, that don't even get the public recognition, that have helped us get in touch with media contacts and things like that have been very helpful. And as Erica said, Nate Carlisle at Fox 13 has done some respectable, good work in the Salt Lake community, shining light on stories that need more attention. And so we were pleased that he took an interest in our work and wanted to take some closer looks at some things that we had discovered through grammar requests and through Erica's contact with people in the community. And so thanks to Mario, Peter, and everyone that's helping with all of this.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And thank you for mentioning that, because like you said, there are a lot of people behind the scenes that do step up to help, and they never, they don't ask for recognition. They're just doing that. Fringe Quest, and I mean people like that who are doing things, or giving us a chance to utilize their skill set. And I think it's a very, very cool thing, because this is the things that we're doing, even though you and I have done a lot and accomplished a lot by ourselves, or with relatively few people helping us, it makes things so much more. We will be able to do a lot more work if we have the ability to utilize some of these people to help us with our work, and then also very critically have the donations that we need to keep the nonprofit, or get the nonprofit going. They're all tax deductible, but there are a lot of behind the scenes costs, not only for the website, for the requests that we're doing, but then there's the time that we spend researching. And I know for myself and for you, I mean, I'm spending at least the amount of time that I would on a full-time job doing the research that I'm doing. And not only that, with the archive, making sure that that has a safe home where it is controlled, the environment's controlled, and things. So there are lots of costs behind the scenes, and we need people to help. And I do appreciate the people that have helped over the years keep UFO Classified on the air. So just want to throw that
Yeah,
out.
there are, and there's also a lot of different directions Erica and I discuss going on a regular basis that aren't limited to fringe topics. We're regularly making plans to get more involved in some service areas, and doing some things with the public, and widening the demographic of people that are served and would be interested in expanding frontiers. And I'm real excited about it and looking forward to it. Yeah.
Yeah, I am too. And you mentioned, and I know that you haven't, we got a little sidetracked. We're going to answer Peter's question here and then dive into that really exciting topic. But I definitely want to stress, and again, you bring up a great point, the fact that we're really committed to broadening our scope, because there are so many issues that are very critical. I mean, as important as I think the UFO topic is, for lots of different reasons, there are many issues that I see going on in my community that have profound effects, not only here, but very far reaching effects. And the Great Salt Lake is a prime example of how, the not paying attention to what is going on, not only not paying attention to what's going on in our environment, but also using funds to promote things that are damaging our environment. I think those are all really key things, and that has an effect not only here in Salt Lake with the toxic dust that is blowing through our community that will continue to do so as the lake dries up, but that also has a very damaging effect for the ecosystem for the world. This isn't just a teeny thing. These are very important issues, and I look forward to over the next few years to actually dig into this and interview people that are making a difference on that front, because to me that is something I'm deeply passionate about. I know you are as well, and I'm sure everybody in chat feels the same way, because you guys are just that cool. So thank you for the super sticker, UFO John Doe, and Steve Long, nice to see you. B Baker. So, okay, let's get back to Peter's question.
Yes, yes. It kind of bleeds into what we're talking about as well. And that one of the things that Erica and I have been covering that I feel like doesn't get the amount of attention it should from other aspects of what we might call the UFO subculture or something of that nature is following the money. That we should be looking at how the circumstances that are popularized and have been for decades in the UFO genre should be put under the same type of scrutiny as if they were other topics. And they should be covered, in my opinion, by the media in similar ways.
Right.
And we have traditionally somewhat of a history of not asking some of the most obvious questions. And I'd like to kind of end some of that, or at least do our part in um, asking where funding comes from. It's reasonable to ask people that just hang out in hotels at UFO conferences several weekends a year what they do for a living. I mean, it's reasonable to ask things like this and how it gets funded and where that money comes from. And that kind of takes us into who Bud Hopkins was and the 1980s, 1990s UFO circuit, where a big part of it, much more than today, and up until a few years ago, was alleged alien abduction. And there was a narrative that people would see flying saucers, they would experience missing time, they would have what amounts to amnesia. They might have some time they couldn't account for that would then be suspected to have been spent with occupants of these crafts in some type of medical procedures, or what came to be known as high strangeness, maybe just some baffling things they might have fragmented memories of. There were, of course, the odd case of people that claim to have full recollection of interacting with non human entities or what seemed to them to be aliens. But a typical thing that got promoted by Bud Hopkins and his circles, which included David Jacobs, John Carpenter, eventually Dr. John Mack from Harvard, was that people would have some uneasy feeling something had happened to them, or they had had a UFO sighting that they couldn't remember um, some time afterwards. And then hypnosis would be used to supposedly pull more memories and details of it. And that got extremely questionable and ethically um, unsound. uh, in all areas of scientific inquiry these days, it is recognized and accepted that hypnosis is not a reliable memory retrieval enhancer. And Bud Hopkins was one of the primary promoters of this, and he wrote popular books and was featured on documentaries. He married Carol Rainey, who I have interacted with extensively, and she has done some interesting work both directly about the UFO experience as well as her critical assessments of things she saw going on in Bud Hopkins's entourage. And so, what specifically, if I might ask Peter, was he wondering about me alluding to? Or do you know, Erica?
You know what? I'm sure he will be answering pretty quick in chat. And I want to just, go back to the 80s. That was definitely not that I was alive back then, but I've heard stories. But,
I was a mere child.
I know
Yes.
exactly. But,
Yes.
I mean, I remember, or I have been told that,
Right. Right.
back in the 80s, Bud Hopkins wrote Intruders. And that was the same time that Whitley Strieber came onto the scene with Communion. And those are very prominent books in not only in the UFO subculture, but I mean that they made quite a splash because, like you mentioned, they were on different talk shows, mainstream talk shows, and people were thinking that they had been abducted, and I know that people have very real experiences, and I don't want to discount what people claim or feel that they've experienced. That's not my point here, but for us talking about the way that some of these people knowingly or unknowingly manipulate people that could potentially have experiences or perhaps have some issues that need to be addressed, things like that. I think those are what you and I are. That's what we're trying to do, is kind of shine a little bit of a light on that. And so, just to go back to what Peter said, you had said you'd interviewed some of his clients that found differences.
Yes. They often use pseudonyms in his books, but some of his clients, people that worked with him, would talk off the record with me and other researchers about that. Um, he took liberties with some of the ways he described things, and um, one in particular that Carol Rainey went into was what became known as the Linda case, and there are just to say there are discrepancies between what she documented and what Bud put in his books is being very kind about it. Um, Carol had written, for instance, about a time that Linda came to their house, their home, and in order to bolster her increasingly doubtful story, she said that her cousin, I believe it was there and would back it up or something to this effect. And so Bud wanted to speak to the cousin, and Linda said that she'd have him call later, later. And so they get a call later that night, and uh, Bud's kind of disturbed about it and asks the cousin a couple of questions and hangs up and gets off the phone. And Carol documented that she asked Bud afterwards, what'd they say? And she, yeah, she backs up the story, and Carol's like, and who was it? And he says it was Linda, pretending that she was Linda's cousin, is who it was. And of course, this kind of thing doesn't make it into his book, while he continues to present her as a credible, important witness what many people in the subculture like to think is just the most important story in the history of humanity, and there's a lot of discrepancies in her story. A lot that she claimed to be kidnapped by the FBI and all kinds of things. Claimed to be in correspondence with the Pope because she had met beings, and it just got so insane that Bud would cease putting all of her claims into his material because he didn't want it to get this bad. Another one was a lady out west that I forget the pseudonym that she used, but in this circumstance, Bud was told by consulting physicians that this woman was extremely traumatized and that it was potentially detrimental to her to enable this story of military abductions and alien abductions and this ongoing stuff. She lived for a while in a shelter for abused and battered women. And Bud did not heed these warnings and continued to use her story and material he would glean from her through hypnosis and other
Oh
means
my gosh.
as in his presentations on the UFO circuit, and didn't include what he had been told by her doctors in this presentation that he had put together. And her stories got to where to the point she was, if I recall right, claiming to see Ralph Nader or someone like this on a craft, and not unlike Linda's, this lady's stories got to the point of being profoundly absurd, and he would edit it to try to keep um, some semblance of the narrative he was trying to create in it. So, and I mean, I could fill the 2 hours with things I know about him and David Jacobs from reliable, documented circumstances like this.
Wow. And that, I mean, to hear, I know, of course, the information that you just put forward about a woman who had really severe trauma, significant trauma, to be used like that is absolutely immoral, reprehensible. I mean, I don't even know what to say. That
That
I mean,
that
that
argument could certainly be made. It would. I certainly wouldn't counter it. The Emma Woods case always comes to mind as well. I had a hand in that and actually directed her to David Jacobs under as I recall, under the suggestion that the only way to know for sure is to be hypnotized, which is just completely, misleading and incorrect information. And like I say, we could just go on and on about this. One of the things that was kind of interesting to me during that point in my research, when I was pretty heavily in contact with Emma Woods and Carol Rainey and some others that had been embedded in that community for quite a while, I got in touch through Emma and others and saw him around at conferences, was the gentleman that is now known as Lucian Greaves that founded the Satanic Temple. And one of the reasons he was interested in all of it was because of the similarities it had to the Satanic Panic and the misinformation, and the use of hypnosis and accusations
Mhm. Hmm.
the accused and the perpetrators change, but the stories kind of stay the same if you just fill in some of the blanks, you
Right,
know?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I've got to just say, Jack, and I'm really sorry to cut you off, but Greg is finally
Good. That is great. That is great. Well, we
yeah,
had a
no.
little segue there, and I
No, and
look
I mean,
forward
and
to
I'm
your
so sorry to
interview
do that
with
because I have
Mr.
a feeling
Long.
that, I mean, obviously how about same time, same place next Friday?
We'll do a half hour every week for a
I don't
while.
seriously, why not? I mean, this you've given me just in this half an hour so much, so many things to think about, and that is really important to me. And so I appreciate that. I learn something new from you all the time. So I appreciate
Always
your
a
willingness
pleasure,
just to pop
Erica.
on and everything. You were fabulous.
All right. Thank you. See
Hey,
you guys
thanks.
later.
Thanks, Jack. Jack will be back next week. He just doesn't know that now. I mean, he does now. So thanks, Jack. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you. Okay, so now this is a miracle. I actually get to see your face. I think that I have, we've talked for many, many years. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can.
Oh,
Hopefully, you can hear
wonderful.
me.
Yeah, you look great. This is
Good, good.
awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah, so and I
yeah.
want to
Yeah, you're
go ahead.
right. We've talked a lot over many phone calls quite a number of years ago. It's probably been last time I talked to you on the phone was probably 3 or 4 years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
But I
So
remember,
I oh,
yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, I yeah, you kind of look like the person in the photos.
Maybe with
Because
a couple years on me.
yeah, I guess, yeah, I remember you're looking at your photos at different places, and I know generally what you look like, but you never have seen me,
I
except on
know.
maybe the back of a book or something.
Well, I am very happy to have you here. And for people that are tuning into the show that do not understand or know who you are, let me give just a brief introduction because I mean I'm really excited to talk to you. So you are an associate at the J. Allen Hynek Center for UFO Studies, CUFOS, which is very very cool. And then Greg became interested in UFOs back in '75. He was actively investigating UFO cases in Washington state and focused on an area, Yakima, which we're going to talk about tonight. It's really a very fascinating place. He has written articles for the International UFO Reporter, published by CUFOS, the MUFON Journal, and was doing a ball of light study. He received his MA in English from Colorado State University, Fort Collins, and I'm Greg. I'm really happy to have you here because your book is one of my favorite books.
Well,
Examining our
I think you said that before, and I kind of like the book myself. I every once in a while I pick it up and I realize that I had to compact into a small space because there was so much information from Yakima that it really kind of tells a good, interesting story. And I selectively chose every good case that Bill Vogel, who was the chief fire control officer, had collected. Others were a little fuzzy at times, a little bit, questionable, but he gathered, enough reports to fill this 3-inch thick 3-ring binder with reports, and he'd done it over years. And I was very lucky because I was living in um, the Yakima area at the time, actually in Richland, Washington, which is near the Hanford site, old Hanford site, when they made one of the
Mhm.
bombs. And I could get up to the reservation about an hour and a half or an hour and 15 minutes. So it was easy to jump up there and meet Vogel, meet witnesses, and leads developed out of witnesses he directed me to. And then I was really happy that the fire lookouts, they're all passed away by now, but I'm very happy that I could sit down with them personally and record their memories and actually written journal entries that they had kept over 20 years. They, as far as lookouts, they logged in these strange things that they were saying. And that was really valuable. That went into the book. So it was quite an effort. I spent quite a number of years doing that and met Vogel. Unfortunately, he had a heart attack in, I think, 1981. And that was kind of devastating because, he could have kept problem recording things, although at that time the activity was a lot lower than it was in the mid 70s, because this activity was occurring roughly from 72 to 76.
Interesting.
Very intense activity. And of course, these were balls of light, like you mentioned, my interest, balls of light. And that book now is very rare. It's hard to find. I wish there was a way to reprint it, because out of curiosity, I check on the web and find out that some sites are selling it for $500.
Are you kidding?
It's that rare, you know.
Wow.
And must have some kind of mystique to it or something. But
I'm thrilled I have 2 copies.
You have 2 copies?
I do.
Good. You're probably worth now $2,000.
My goodness, had I known.
I really don't know. But yeah, that was quite an adventure, because I was, as I said, living in Richland, and actually subsequently in Kennewick. You know, there's a Tri-Cities, it's called, which is in southeastern rather, Washington State. And you can just get up right to the reservation. And you know what's kind of funny is that I had gotten a master's in literature from Colorado State University, and looking for a job, through a fellow student, he contacted me with Battelle Laboratories, which is one of the scientific and engineering laboratories in Hanford, again, the site of one of the bombs for World War II. And as a result of the location, I could get up to Yakima, like I said. But you know, the first day that I moved into town with my wife at that time, I interviewed, and then we moved in to settle in a motel for a while until we could find a house. I opened the newspaper, and here was the story about Yakima. When I say Yakima, we should tell your audience the Yakima Indian Reservation. And so there it was, and there was a picture of Bill Vogel looking at these slides, and I read the article. It was very rational and calm and to the point and factual. And I thought, now this is something that's in my backyard. So I eventually, after having 2 children, well, not me, my wife having 2 children, I had time to go and meet Vogel. You know, by the way, men do not give birth. But that's just my.
I think I saw in the National Enquirer, though, that it happened once, didn't it? The National Enquirer said it did.
Oh, a man gave birth. Oh, good. Well, we're having a lot of breakthroughs now. I think our society is advancing very well, and I don't want to talk about that. But anyway, so it was an adventure going up there, like I said, and you know, eventually I did see a light myself, and it's kind of a strange atmosphere when you go up there, because the reservation is vast, you know, and there's 2 ridges. Toppenish Ridge is one of them, and a Tandem Ridge. And there's ranchers out there. The land is leased to non-Indians, because it's owned by or operated by the Yakima Indian Reservation Tribal Council. But when you go there at night, it's quiet and the sky is clear. And these lookouts on their towers, you know, would see these things. And they really, as I said, the heyday of that was in 72 to 76. And there was a local engineer named Dave Akers. He's a private fellow. I never met him, but I met him once. I'm sorry for the book, but I haven't met him since then. He went up there and did some studies and did some stakeouts, as we would call them, and actually saw lights, and he photographed them. And that was solid evidence. And then Vogel would send his reports to CUFOS, Center for UFO Studies, in Evanston, Illinois. And Hynek, J. Allen Hynek, actually your audience might be familiar with, you know, him. He was the Air Force consultant for almost 20 years. And he eventually, after trying to explain many of these sightings, he was convinced that a lot of them were real, or something, you know, truly unidentifiable. So he started the Center for UFO Studies, and Vogel would send his reports up there. And Hynek finally went up to the reservation, interviewed him and these fire lookouts, and he went away. I don't remember what he said. I quoted in the book, but he went away saying that this was one area where there was some of the highest activity at that time in the United States. And David Akers, who I mentioned, was after that visit was stationed out there under some funding to spend at least 2 weeks, looking for the lights. And like I said, he saw them. So anyway, hopefully someone can find a book, or maybe we can get it reprinted or something. I kind of like it myself.
I know, I mean, you need that needs to happen. Like and I know it's really difficult right now, and it's so, books it just seems like books are I hate to say a dime a dozen, but there's so many out there now. Like, how do you even begin
Yeah,
to go
I
about
go out.
that?
I go out occasionally. I look at Amazon and other places, and there must be several, a score or 40 books or something. I've never even heard of them, and many of them appear to have what their titles say, rather sensational things about UFOs. And it sounds like there's a lot of so-called experts who decided that they're just going to write a book. And there are still some classic books that I wish the newer generation of ufologists would be able to find. And I think they're reprinting them. The UFO Experience by Hynek, J. Allen Hynek, is a great one. He co-authored one called The Edge of Reality with Jacques Vallée,
Mhm.
which people should buy that book. The UFO Controversy in America by David Jacobs, although it's now a little bit dated, but it gives you a pretty good overview of what was going on in the country in the 70s. And there's a host of other books. I would hope that, fans of the subject, serious fans, okay, who really want to know, the solid history of UFO activity and the study of it, would start making some contact with some maybe older ufologists and get a list of these books and buy them and start there. They're
Right.
they're dated in the respect that they were written 20, 30 years ago, but you've got to have a solid foundation and knowledge of the UFO subject before you go out in the field and start investigating this topic yourself, because you can learn a lot from those books.
And I think that's one reason that I'm so grateful that I have the library that I do, because whether, I mean, and I look back at some of these books, and even though they're old, and, I'm sure very fantastic at the time, I still wouldn't believe any of it to save my life, And so the history of the subject is very rich with people that are, prone to fantasy, making up things to make money, or potentially have a need to promote a narrative. And so,
Mhm.
what are like, if you look back historically, what are some of the books that you would say you would read now and just be, mortified, or warn other people to? And
Uh,
I'm sure the list is
yeah.
long, but
Well, Gulf Breeze. I remember Gulf Breeze split MUFON almost apart because investigators went out there that immediately praised. I can't remember the photographer's name, but he was seeing this craft, and he had a photograph using a Polaroid camera, I think, on the deck of his house there in Gulf Breeze, Florida. I'm not sure where Gulf Breeze is located exactly. I think it's sort of the northern part of the state. Anyway, he was seeing this craft a lot and taking photographs. And Bruce Maccabee, unfortunately, he is, I guess he still remains, one of the top photo analysts, ufological photo analysts. He endorsed it, and I think he got a cut of the money on that book. I think this guy sold it for $200,000. Was it $200,000? That's a monstrous amount of money.
wow.
And there were more analysis was done by level-headed people, and eventually that craft that he saw, a model of it which matched his photograph, was found in the attic of one of the homes that was built in a housing development. Apparently, he hid it up there, and that came out. Anyway, there's no need to read Gulf Breeze. I wouldn't read Gulf
Right, right.
Breeze.
And so it's Ed Walters. I want to say thank you to Steve and
Yeah,
Drew.
there you go.
Yep,
Go.
yep.
Ed
And
Walters.
I have that book as well. And so,
But it's good. I guess if you could get it really, really, really cheap, you can put it in a section called likely hoaxes. Okay.
right.
And just kind of remember there are people, like you say, who get into this field to make money. who are amateurs who come up with a theory. And by the way, almost every theory now has been published and exhausted. So I don't
Right.
know if some of these people are going to come up with anything new, you know. So start with the classics, UFO Controversy in America, Hynek's books, co-written with Valet. Valet is probably worth reading too, although he's more. How do you describe Valet? I know that his introductions appear now in a lot of books. He just kind of endorses those books, so to speak.
Right.
And I would question what he's doing there. But he's a giant. He's still a giant in the field. Michael Swords and others, UFOs and government. It's a big tome of a book. It must weigh a pound and 2 pounds or something. It's a large scale, big book.
Right. And Barry and Jan and
Barry Greenwood contributed.
So
Robert Powell.
Right.
Oh, sorry.
And Richard Thiem.
Yes. And a lot of those people are now, I think they're setting up their own science-oriented, call them societies or groups of like-minded scientists. You want to look at this very seriously. I know Robert Powell's very serious. I think he was with MUFON for a while, Robert Powell.
He was, yeah. He was there and quit the same time that I was state director because there was the Corey Good. This was during the Corey Good super soldier kind of debacle with MUFON, and I think Robert just said, I'm done with this. I'm not going to be involved with an organization that's promoting that kind of nonsense. But it was very interesting. I just have to go back and
I'm not going to.
Oh, yeah, just really quick.
I was going to say I'm not.
Go ahead.
I interrupted your train of thought.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Okay. MUFON, I'm not going to knock it completely because they did publish some articles I wrote about the Yakima sightings. And actually, I was a staff writer for a while. And Richard Hall, I communicated with him a little bit at the time. No, Richard Hall, of course, the UFO, the report on the UFO wave of 1947 by Ted Blocher, someone ought to find that one. And the UFO evidence, which is, I guess, by Richard Hall. I think it's Richard Hall.
Yep.
Two other things that your newer ufologists ought to go and buy. But no, MUFON, enthusiastic group of people, but they tended to have just people don't think very critically, and they're enthusiasts in the worst way in some ways. On the other hand, they used to publish some pretty good stuff, and like I said, I enjoyed having things published there. That helped me. But Gulf Breeze was kind of a point at which I didn't want to be a member of them anymore, because that, Walt Andrus, who was the director of MUFON at the time, he endorsed Gulf Breeze, and I think the organization is kind of going the wrong way. But if you're a MUFON member now, I think the training is a lot better. I looked at some of the training materials, and there's probably some good people in MUFON. I kind of wonder about what they're doing selling abduction reports, which they did. I think you're probably aware of that, huh?
Yeah, and I want to just go back to really quick, and this is what I was going to say, because of when I couldn't get you because of the StreamYard and different links, but Jack Brewer was on and talking a little bit about David Jacobs and some of the things that happened later, in his life that were potentially questionable with regard to alleged abductees and things. And so I just I would be remiss if I didn't just mention that David Jacobs has definitely had a very controversial history in the subject, especially as of late.
I read about what he did. I'm not going to talk about it.
Right. Yeah, right. But I just have to throw that in there. But MUFON, like any organization, there are good people. There are people that have great chapters. I've been very lucky to speak at some of them and still have an open invitation to speak, and would do that because I like the people that are involved. I think over the years, the organization as a whole, the director of the organization, the executive director, and headquarters didn't necessarily have the best handle on the chapters, and there were a lot of things that were taking place that, you saw that it ran the gamut. And so I think that wasn't necessarily in the best interest of the organization, because you didn't have a tight, you didn't have control over what other people were doing and representing the name of the organization. So that's been interesting to see.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is considered grassroots and self-funded by people who want to put their money and time into their local efforts. Investigating research and writing reports, but it's grassroots. The executive level, I'm not sure how much they want to influence those local chapters to go different directions. And what I'm saying is, when you want to do your own thing and move on, one of the good things about it is you have a lot of freedom. On the other hand, move find themselves with state section directors or others, who have a rather what's the word? Weird view, perhaps, of the phenomenon, and then they propagate it their own way locally. But anyway, enough of MUFON.
No, but that's,
kind of
these are good things. Because I think people need to understand, like, the history, and they need to see somebody or hear from somebody like you who's had a long, you've been in the subject a long time, you've seen a lot of things. And so I think it's important. I know it's important to hear your thoughts about it, so other people that are getting into the subject have a good basis, to make decisions.
Yeah, that's okay. I didn't want to. I didn't want to spend too much time on bashing them, because, like I say, I think they collected a lot of reports over the years, and there's got to be in them some good stuff, And people who were associated with MUFON was Bruce McAvee. We just mentioned him, photo analyst, and there's some other names I don't remember would write articles frequently there. There are a lot of engineers at that time, maybe who would write from an engineering and science point of view about, how do you separate the wheat from the chaff when you're receiving reports and things of that nature. But the problem with UFOs in general, with the subject UFOs, it's sort of unlicensed, uncertified, and not managed by some great authority. So the members of the public, they get really fascinated with it, and I still have great fascination, and they run off in the way they're going to run off in their direction with their energy. And if they're not well trained, like I said, and they have not got a good grounding in the subject and how you separate, rumor from fact, you're going to end up with stuff that is a waste of a lot of people's time. So, speaking of CUFOS, now that it's really aged a lot, you're aware of that. There is a good solid handful of people from CUFOS. Michael Swords was one of them. We mentioned him with the book UFOs and Government, and Robert Thiem and others are doing great work, and they do it quietly, amongst themselves, and kind of peer review their own work and do it that way. So if you want to be a member of MUFON, it's a fascinating subject, but do your study, read the history, get a solid grounding. When you go and interview someone, take your star chart with you, and be skeptical. I call it being an open-minded skeptic. I mean, that means you're willing, to go as far as the evidence takes you, but be somewhat doubtful, because the public, in many ways, generally do not look at the sky, and they're not that discerning about what they're seeing. And
right.
I still see on the internet articles about, and they call them UFOs, bright UFO hurtles across sky over Kansas. And I'm going, if it's hurtling across the skies and it's really bright and really fast, it may be space debris or a meteor. So let's not, call it a UFO. It's like with the balloon shoot down, the Chinese balloon. I noticed that the headlines in a lot of these articles on the internet were UFO balloon shot down, or
right,
UFO shot down. And I'm going, really? There were, the ones up in Alaska and the one in
Right.
Canada or whatever. Kept UFO, but no, it's only unidentified because you don't know exactly what it is. But from the descriptions and even the cursory ones, kind of indicated there were slow-moving objects, weren't behaving in a real strange way, you know. And when they were shot down, they did not evade being shot down because UFOs are always evasive. They're usually evasive. I don't know of any case that you can prove that a true UFO, let's say a spacecraft, has been really shot down. I mean, Roswell people like that thing, and nonetheless, I don't know unless the government has the evidence of a truly shot down UFO. I wouldn't jump the gun and start using the words or the label UFO and everything.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Right. And I'm sure it's good clickbait. I mean, it just gets people, they're, UFO. And, you've got to, you get people to go to a certain news source. And it's, really, it's great, I guess, if you want to get more views. So it is interesting. And I just have to say, and I'm reading.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
I just had to say really quick.
I was going to say people are emotional.
Yeah, they are. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I want to just mention that it's kind of funny. And I don't know if you can hear this on your end, but I can hear faint music in the background. And I'm trying to figure out, and people are saying that it's
far,
it's so apparently it's quite pleasant. People are enjoying the background music.
I'm going to take. Can you hear me without these headphones?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Yeah.
I'll be right back. Hold on. I'm sorry about that.
Okay.
I've never done this with you before.
This is what you guys get, literally when you have Expanding Frontiers, but mostly on UFO Classified. So we've got these live action moments. You never know what's going to happen, who's going to be on the show or off the show, or what we're going to be filming or hearing. But that does make the broadcast all the more exciting, in my opinion. And so,
all right.
So was that on your end?
Yeah, my apologies. Yeah, we have, on your TV, you can pick up, we have music choice. I don't know if
okay.
You can play smooth jazz and blues and everything. And it was
I think everybody liked it.
Well, hopefully they could hear our voices while liking it.
They could. It was just like a faint thing in the background, and I'm like, is that coming? So no, that's really, and this is what makes I love doing live shows, because you never know what's going to happen, and this is just going to be a very fond memory for me about talking to you, hearing your great music in the background.
Well, there was once live TV, believe it or not, you young folks out there.
Well, and it's funny, I think, was it NBC that still tries to do every once in a while, they'll try to do a rendition of The Sound of Music or things like that, and they do it the live version.
There's probably some live things that are happening, but there was live TV where there were variety shows,
right,
in the 50s, and
Mary Tyler Moore, and was Mary Tyler Moore, was that filmed in front of an audience?
Well, it sounded like a live audience applauding and laughing.
Bob Newhart, and
so they're probably shot live. I'm not sure they're actually broadcast live, but
interesting. Anyway, well, thank you for that brief interlude. Music, live TV. This is great. And so let's get back to your time with CUFOS. I mean, who are some of the people that you interacted with? What are some of the experiences that you fondly remember from that time?
Boy, Mark Rodiger, I happened to be working for an engineering company at the time, and there was a project going on up in Milwaukee. So I flew up there. I was there like 2 weeks, and I asked Mark, I guess I must have phoned him or wrote him or something, if I could visit his, the offices there in Evanston. And I met him, and who else? I can't remember who else I met. I feel a little embarrassed by that, but I met him, and it was very interesting to go into their old offices, in which everything was not a very big space, but there were everything was kind of packed together with huge filing cabinets, which were dated 1947, up to the current time. Just absolutely packed with stuff. I was absolutely floored. I did not know they had this much. They had magazines like Fate magazine, which kind of a borderline thing, I guess. But they had anything that had material in it related to UFOs and other paranormal subjects, but primarily UFOs was in there. They had a little, I guess you might call it a reading room. And in fact, someone came in just off the street and wanted to inquire into UFOs. And he sat down and read a couple of things and scratched his head and looked around at the walls and probably realized, whoa, I don't know. This is pretty fantastic. What do I know? and he left, and I got some copies of things they had me allowed me to have, things that weren't secret or anything. But I noticed that there were just things I don't think have been published at all. And I don't know how many filing cabinets there are. Barry Greenwood, who you've talked to, has been working on scanning the CUFOS material. And I thought he said one time there's like 50 filing cabinets or something like that of stuff.
Wow.
The big metal, creaky filing cabinets. So that impressed me a lot to know that there was a dedicated band of people here with not really lavish offices, which really aren't needed. But Barry used to tell me, people in the public think that when you call up to report a UFO, you're going to reach some sort of research lab funded by a bunch of people who have deep pockets, and it's a big scientific organization. But what it has been since the inception is individual people in small groups in somewhat larger organizations like MUFON and APRO, that's another old one, Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, and then Center for UFO Studies, and NICAP, which people I'm sure know what that means, I hope, National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena. All of those are self-funded. Again, the public, the individuals within the public are serious or doing this out of their own pocket, But they've amassed such huge amounts of information. It's really pretty much overwhelming. And the thing that has struck me about the current interest by the government, U.S. government on this whole, it seems like I read an article about, well, we need to pull together more of the history of this subject, right? Because the last two reports have focused in on the Nimitz affair or event, 2004, and then the subsequent sightings. I guess there was the ones in the Atlantic during some military exercises. And there's supposedly was a report that Luis Elizondo was putting together that was like 450 pages long. And I would often talk to Barry and say, what's in there? Are these new reports, or are they just gleaned them from little different places? But if the government was serious and really looking into the sightings, there are literally tens of thousands. I'm talking about tens and tens of thousands of reports collectively from CUFOS and MUFON and the old APRO files, which have, quote, vanished. Barry ought to tell you about that someday. And NICAP, and then individual investigators and researchers who've amassed things themselves, privately.
Right.
And so to go back to CUFOS, they're one of those groups, that was just doing this out of their own pockets and donations to try to keep the whole subject alive. The government now, as I guess, believing or hoping they're going to be sort of experts, but they don't have I don't think they have a firm grounding on the extent of this, of UFOs. I just don't think they have that. And
well, with Travis Taylor leading the way, they're in good hands.
Travis, I heard that name of Travis Taylor.
He's on the Skinwalker Ranch show. He's been on TV shows for 10 years, and he was working with the government.
I think so. I feel like I saw him on television one time. Isn't he supposedly has a PhD or something?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, there are these individual people, and the frustrating thing about the UFO subject, in a way, well, it is frustrating. Maybe there's one of frustrations, is that what gravitates to the top in the subject are people who claim to have expertise in the subject.
Mm-hmm.
And here's our British spokesman. He's written Nick. Is it Nick Pope?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Nick Pope, having been looking at reports that came out of the UK for a period of time, and now I see his face a lot on different places. He started appearing on Tucker Carlson 4 years ago or something like that, 3 or 4 years ago, and I'm going, he talks with great authority, but he himself does not know what all the reports collectively add up to say. See, that's the frustration. You have all the reports, all these sources, where they're located. They've never been fully computerized and never been analyzed and looking for fact patterns and things that can reveal what we're dealing with, but they speak loudly about their expertise. You know, and Robert Bigelow is another one. I don't see him really speaking a lot recently, but you know, he's got money, and so he's got personal interest in it, and so he's now going to be the center of, you know, a key, you know, contractor who's going to work with the government and solve this whole thing. So I follow ARROS. That's the name of that's the new federal government, the All Domain Anomalous.
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
I follow that with interest, you know, and I look forward to their annual reports. But what's frustrating in that regard is the first report 2 years ago had a lot of redacted stuff in it regarding the shape of the objects. They would have, you know, the observer saw a redacted, you know, one of those black ribbons they put across the text. And the most recent report I read, it didn't say anything really, except if you look real carefully in one of the paragraphs, it says there are a number of reports that demonstrate objects with performance capabilities that are beyond our current knowledge or something like that. And I'm so frustrated because why in the heck can't you just publish? And you can redact the observers and exact locations, but publish the reports of what they're seeing, you know? And I bet you what they're seeing is exactly what was being seen in 47 up to the present date. And Luis Elizondo has pointed out these observables, you know, I think there are 5 key observables, you know, right angle turns and hovering and stopping and whatever. And so I'm going off a tangent here, but it's an exciting time to be involved with the subject, as long as you get a good solid understanding and footing in the thing to see how the latest effort on the government's part is going to pan out. You know, how's it really going to pan out? And it's too bad, unless it's going on behind the scenes, that the federal government isn't working with the public, private investigators, serious, you know, ufologists to combine.
Well, according to some of them, they are. I mean, you know.
Is it all secret?
But, you know, and I've got to ask you because, you know, I mean, obviously we've made such great advancements. You know, I mean, we're having drone incursions over nuclear installations. We're, you know, around, you know, I mean, it's a very serious thing, and there are all sorts of things flying around that people, like you mentioned, who aren't trained observers, who don't have a handle on what they're witnessing, could mistake as an unidentified object. And people, and I know that Dr. Haynes wrote a book about observing UFOs and different challenges people have in their observations and things. That's a really great book that was written a long time ago. He worked for NASA. And so, you know, what do you think now, because there is so much of this clutter going on around us, like why, and our intelligence communities are trying to figure out what this is, if this is a threat to national security. So why would they work with civilians on this when there is information that is potentially damaging to our country? And it's
I think what you're suggesting is that they actually acquired all of these solid cases from private sources, that it might reinforce their early findings. I call them early because they seem like this is new for them, and would, I guess, provide very strong evidence that what they are seeing is spacecraft or a technology that transcends current developments. Because the objects like Kenneth Arnold, the daylight discs in 1947, which sort of kicked off the whole phenomenon. If they're being seen today, then either back engineering has gone on and the U.S. government has developed their own discs, which is sort of silly in terms of their current studies because they should know that. So why are they, hiding this information? You know what I'm saying? It's like the solid reports in the public would help them develop a complete picture. Okay. And if that complete picture indicated that they can't control what they're looking at, that is a technology beyond their kin, and it is a threat, it's the same problem they had back in the 40s. Are they going to tell the public that? Because, Blue Book and, Project Sign and then Blue Book Grudge and Project Sign ended up debunking everything. And that was because they didn't know what it was. And they weren't going to admit to the public that they didn't know what it was. So they got out of supposedly, studying it. So I don't know. I initially was pretty enthusiastic when I read that New York Times report that came out in 2017 announcing Elizondo had kind of opened it up, and the funding from Harry Reid and others. Yeah, I thought, wow, we're going to find out some stuff now. The government has the money. You private people don't have the money to do this. And so now the money's being provided, and yet the reports that you get are sanitized, and there's hardly anything to satisfy a UFO historian or any person at all about what they're seeing. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So it's like we're kind of going through the same process that happened during the Blue Book time, the Blue Book era. And of course, what does complicate it is the development of drones and who knows what else that were developed by the Chinese, Russians, U.S. That's the sort of party line that is told. And now, if pilots are seeing these drones, actual technology developed by people, right? They don't want to tell us what they look like, because then Russia or China is going to back engineer that based upon the details of what they're seeing. So the drones have not helped the whole subject. I can tell you that. Smaller devices and things like that.
Right. I mean, it is very interesting, and I have to, just wonder. I mean, if there was potentially something here, why would it be something that would behave in ways? I mean, we would look at an airplane and say, okay, this is what's happening. And there have been people over the years who have gone out to fields and said, the UFOs are here, they're coming, and I'm going to show you, that they're here. I think that Betty Hill was somebody who did that at one point. And, she brought a reporter out to the field, and they were airplanes.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah. I think she had some sort of experience, but unfortunately, it sounds like it took her to a place where she began seeing things that they weren't kind of there, or they didn't do what she expected them to do. And it's an interesting case, the interrupted journey, because I think it still stands the test of time of being something truly real happening to them on whatever level of reality we're talking about. But
right.
Over time. But the whole UFO subject is fascinating if you really want to get yourself into it, because it's going to take effort, because you're going to have to turn the TV off, and you're going to have to find a quiet place and read a book, of which I recently read that most 70% or more of high school students graduating today actually can't write anything, and their reading comprehension is really bad, thanks to our technology. Right. And that opens the UFO subject to all kinds of exploitation and sensationalism, because if people don't want to study and they don't want to read about anything, they'll just kind of accept whatever quote turns them on. Right.
Right.
But with what I've been doing with the Yakima thing, got me going to look into this particular aspect of the phenomenon, which is this ball of light. and I think I might have sent you some stuff. I
You
don't know if
did, and I'm going to just show really quickly this.
Yeah, that's from Yakima. Now, these are not extremely clear because I was trying to find in my files the copies of the original slides, and I had to photograph them off of the examining of the Earthlight Theory. But the thing about them is they're typically reddish orange.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they're just called orange, but I notice a pattern where they're reddish orange. And plasmas has been mentioned as being what they are. And I don't know if you can see this, but this is a book by Philip J. Phil J. Glass, of course, and kind of a nasty guy, and he debunked UFOs. That was his job. But I decided to go back in there because it's got stuff in there about plasmas. And I've been studying a lot recently about what is a plasma. And looking at Exeter, New Hampshire, which people might be familiar with. And that's where Class decided to look at plasmas when he found out in Exeter these balls of light were being seen near high tension power lines. And it was discounted. So I decided, well, I'll just go check and see if it makes any sense at all. And it kind of makes sense. It kind of doesn't make sense. But that has become part of a longer study, looking at balls of light, reddish orange balls of light, and sometimes they're yellow, sometimes they are white, okay, a few green ones, and so on and so forth. Here's another, it looks sort of plasma-like, or it could be the effect of the camera, but it looks like it's either moving or there's two parts to it. That's from Yakima also, and the clarity is not the greatest, but David Akers, I believe, took that one. Another one, you can see the orange in there and so on. And so what is that? Is that a natural phenomenon, or is that, something going on with a, quote, spaceship, and why at Yakima? And why at these other places? And I think I saw several months ago, you did an interview with one of the sons of Harley Rutledge. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. That was that was a really great interview. That was smart.
Really good, because Harley Rutledge, if your viewers know that, in the 70s, again, which is kind of interesting because it coincides just about the same time frame as Yakima,
right,
was seeing and photographing plasma-like, if you want to call them that, or balls of light in the skies up there in southeast Missouri, and there's a consistency there between those two sites, and there's many others that I'm looking at. And I think you're familiar with Utah. I think who was it's been a while, the doctor who
Frank Salisbury.
That's right, Frank Salisbury, UFO display. So, yeah, what I've been trying to do is take one part of the vast subject, and especially all the different shapes and descriptions of these light forms or objects, so let's call them objects, and see if there's some way that I, as just a little old, really old, private guy, not being a scientist, but having, I think, a pretty good eye to analyze things, it's try to see some connect here, and maybe can open some explanation to some of this stuff. Now, some of it could be earthquake related. I think I sent you something about a earthquake faulting in the southeast U.S., or maybe, I can't remember. I threw this together. The visuals for you, Erica, really
right.
quick.
You were so wonderful, and I'm going to try to share this screen now. I've been again having interesting times with StreamYard today, so we'll see what we can do. But
I'm sorry. Actually, it was my fault. I got on late. I forgot to scroll down at the bottom of the screen where it says Enter Studio. Whatever.
You made my night. Okay.
We're sitting there going, she's supposed to connect me as a guest.
Oh my gosh, that is! I'm so
right,
glad it wasn't me, because sometimes it's a little questionable. So
I'm not real computer literate, but it's like I'm sitting there going, Erica's supposed to do this. Why am I? And it was me. Anyway, yeah, if you have some things or you could show them, but
yes.
It's just
go ahead.
I was going to say any object ought to be studied.
Right.
their behaviors ought to be studied. And why there are lights, then it's usually described as lights that make these sudden right angle turns, or lights that revolve around each other, or lights that will split and shoot off in different directions. Sometimes they'll come back and merge. They're ones that make spiraling motions in the sky. In some cases, they seem to be ejecting from another object, that sort of thing. And if the government's going to put science on this, the ideal thing, of course, is to have a large body of reports, and they can then do their analysis of those things, which would be nice if they did. So anyway, I think partially because they live in the Northwest, where there is Mount Rainier and Mount St. Helens, eruption and faults, and that sort of thing. And we're on the edge of the Ring of Fire, as it's called, along the West Coast. Kind of kept me interested over the years about this particular light form, if you want to call it that, or a ball of light or ball of energy. Certainly there's energy involved, but the little balls of light that chase automobiles is also very intriguing. And I ask myself if there's a connection with these larger ones, which these larger ones, kind of an estimate, might be 10 to 50 feet in diameter. Where do those smaller ones come from? I don't know. Yeah, there's something that's probably too detailed to read, but it's showing you, I believe, earthquake activity in the southeast United States. And it's interesting, and also in Missouri, it's interesting that anyone, in this case it was me, can go and find maps from various places, look at earthquake history, and see what's happening there, And it could be the ball of light. Many of them at low level could be explained as being the results of tectonic strain or earthquake activity, which would kind of clear up the main body of UFO reports that have been collected over the years. On the other hand, if it's tending to lead that way, and a lot of scientists are saying, something, I think it's better we look at the ones at higher altitude. Let's look at things that are way up there, and let's look at the ones that are approaching jet aircraft, and look at ones like spheres that have cubes in them. If you remember that report from two pilots during exercises in the Atlantic,
right,
2014 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Those are probably a little bit more, quote, sexy than the ball of light. But if you're really interested in the subject, you can delve in any aspect of this.
Right. Well, and I've always loved, like, over the years, like, talking to you, like, and you have been so gracious to send, all of these wonderful ball of light reports from newspaper clippings and different things. And I just find that absolutely fascinating. That's what really, back when I was involved with MUFON, that's what really had my interest, because it is, over the years I've collected and interviewed people that have had fascinating encounters with them. I interviewed somebody on my show that had an encounter by the Great Salt Lake, which was very interesting. So they are really, it's a fascinating area.
Yeah, it's like, why do they appear, and sometimes only singly, that might be one of them, it could be two of them, two people in an isolated area, let's say. Nobody else ever sees them. And it sticks with the witness as being something truly extraordinary. I know that you saw some balls of light. I think that's one reason why you called me.
I've seen some interesting things, and now I will say that I've learned a little bit more. I have to second guess. I have to say that some of the things that I saw were explainable.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. That's what science is all about, is there are hypotheses to be tested and data to be collected, and it could be years later someone actually finds a solution to it.
Right. But there's still a couple things that I can't explain, and perhaps I will at some point in time, but I find that fascinating. And I think that's one thing for me that keeps me going. Not only, the intrigue with personalities and some of these things that have taken place, but just the study, the passion for exploring the unknown.
Right. And you know what it does for you, or anyone who who looks into these things, it gets you to check your own thought processes,
Mm-hmm.
because you need to go in, like I said, as an open-minded skeptic, and you can't just walk away concluding you have the explanation, which could be the explanation could be you don't know what it is or whatever. And then as you develop your expertise, in reading cases after cases after cases, in book after book, and then practicing field investigations, you can start to hone your ability to kind of quickly remove, from the data set, those things that really don't have any value. And I think the federal government does that. I think this, I don't know who's involved in doing it, but they seem to come up, like I said, with these little indications in these annual reports. There's something beyond, have performance capabilities beyond our knowledge. So you're kind of going, well, you're practicing honing and your skills and separating the wheat from the chaff, and we're kind of getting down to the nub. And I just wish we individually and as groups had the money and the time to do that kind of work on our own. I think it's being tried. Who is the fellow that is he from Harvard who thinks that
Avi Loeb.
Avi Loeb? Yeah, I was reading something that he's gotten some funding to set up some different some equipment in different parts of the country to look for something. That's pretty good. Maybe they'll provide something. But again, it's money. It's support. It's someone who's open-minded. It's someone who has, the scientific method understood and practiced, and something could come of it. Yeah. So that's what I'm doing. Is kind of looking at one aspect of it and enjoying it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a real, I have to catch myself. Okay, I'm enjoying this. This is supposed to be fun, because I think with the Skinwalker Ranch, episodes and interacting with people that don't have the best intentions, some really nefarious characters, I think that tends to take your passion and joy out of the exploration. Which is the reason that I loved it, and the reason that it was just like, oh my gosh, I can look up in the sky, and whether this is ET or not, I'm still learning and making myself a better person. And that's so that's been a very, very that's been a really great asset to me as an individual, to learn more about the world around me, to learn more about geology, to learn more about astronomy, to learn more about human behavior and all of these things. So that's enriched me, no matter what, if they admit that, all of these things are taking place or not.
Yeah, well, you're exercising your mind, which I think every individual in the world ought to be doing.
Right.
And not be sucked into some belief systems, so they could be religious or political or whatever, that, question yourself and say, well, why do I believe that? Maybe I should research these people making their statements or publishing what they're doing and check it and find out, am I using my inherent ability to reason, rather than be emotional and have feelings only in my mind or my heart. And you develop as a person. It is frustrating, like you've mentioned. You've met some people that are somewhat nefarious, and it's frustrating because you're working hard on your stuff and getting some stuff published or heard, and then you get some crank or some, I don't know, nefarious person who steps in there and upsets the apple cart, and then the media picks it up, and then everyone's accused of wearing tinfoil hats, and it doesn't help the whole thing. So I don't know. Hopefully it'll mature with the next generation.
I hope so, because and I even, with the show, that's the one thing I've loved about doing that. The people that are in chat, and they're all over the world. They're from all over the world. They ask questions. They are intelligent. They could see warning signs when those warning signs come up. And I really appreciate that about everybody, that supports the show, because that's what we need. And it's really difficult when you don't have a budget, you don't have a marketing team, you don't have all of these people that can promote things on social media, and you're so inundated with people and, little TikTok videos and this and that. It's like we've become, the way we process information has completely changed. It's not like I'm going to sit down and read a 500-page book.
Right.
It's like
When
I'm
I want to do
looking at
that.
something for 10 seconds and then, oh, bright shiny object. Oh, bright shiny
Yeah,
object.
it's a shiny object. Yeah, you live with your senses and your desire to be entertained and move through life sort of blindly, just in quote, enjoying yourself and having pleasures, which are okay, but you have a brain with the ability to reason. Okay, it hurts to reason at times,
You're
but you
right.
ought to do it to protect yourself if you're not aware of what's happening around you and prepare yourself how you're going to deal with life's challenges and crises. You better have also some self-discipline and the ability to detect things around you that are dangerous or helpful or whatever. So that's kind of why I got involved in it. Is as a kid, I remember getting a copy of the report on unidentified flying objects by Edward Ruppelt or Ruppel. Does anyone know how to pronounce his name?
I thought it was repelled. I
Ruppelt?
mean, I don't know. We have 50
Yeah.
different.
He was the Project Blue Book head for about I think it was 2 years, not a long time, but he wrote this wonderful book. And whenever it came out, that's how old I was because I was born in 46. So maybe I was 10 or something. Anyway, I remember reading that with fascination. I still have it. I've been dragging this thing around all over the place. And then I kind of lost. Then I became what we like to call a UFO buff. I cut out all the articles from the newspaper about UFOs and stuff. Now I wonder where that thing ended up. My mother probably threw it away. And then I kind of got into science fiction and fantasy, and then I kind of put it out of my mind for a while until I discovered, after Blue Book supposedly solved everything, that there was this wave that occurred in the U.S. in 72, 73. And that's when I really got involved in getting books and reading them in depth. And then, after that, I fell luckily into being close to Yakima and looking into that. So,
How fun.
got to work at it. You got to work at it if you want to know about it. It's all out there. You just have to be careful and be able to have your radar up to separate the BS, okay, from stuff that might really be helpful and maybe true. Yeah.
And I mean, like, to look at, what you did with Yakima, and it reminds me of, what people here in Utah have done, just going out and sitting with people, like actually traveling to places and interviewing people in their own environment. I think that is a really remarkable thing. I love doing that. And so for you, that must have been a really great joy.
It really was, because I met people who were down to earth people. These were farmers or ranchers or some tribal policemen or sort of everyday folks, if you want to call them something like that. Well, we're all everyday, but I mean, these are people just working hard for a living. It's their, you can see around them their values through what they have in their homes, the way they talk, how they speak, and you can detect, whether they are being truthful or not. And it starts to open up the world to you, and it breaks down any presumptions you might have about other people and other cultures. And I ended up talking to Indians, Yakima Indians, again, the fire lookouts, and just a whole variety of people. And it teaches you skills in listening, and observing and reflecting upon what you've learned. And it is an adventure, it really is. So, I mean, if any of your viewers have some areas near you that have a history, it might be worth going back and digging through files on that and just exploring that. And in the process, you're going to find out probably things you didn't expect to find. And you go home with little gems. Sometimes you come up with a gem, GM, and take it home and embark on that. It's exciting to do that, and that's what I enjoy doing. I'm trying to do it still now and still right, at the same time, but a little older now. So traveling is not as big as it used to be.
Right.
But
With COVID and with, the cost of traveling.
COVID, yeah. But you need to get outside, because I was outside with my second wife, who's since passed away, and we went up to a mountain, and the coastal range of mountains in Oregon, up to a mountain called Mary's Peak, which is 4,100 plus slightly feet in altitude or in elevation. And we went up there and we had some experiences seeing things, which I hope to report on finally. I've kept them kind of private because I don't know. It's kind of an old view that I think that people who write about UFOs, well, they can't say they actually saw anything because they're losing their objectivity. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You're the cool lens of science observing like a clinician what's going on. And if you see something, you're going to go, well, I'm not going to tell anyone about that because that'll damage my reputation.
Right. Right.
I think that needs to be put aside now, because years ago I asked a bunch of people associated with CUFOS if they've ever seen anything, and they told me they had. Michael Spurd said that he saw something. He didn't elaborate a lot on it, but I wish he would. I should ask him to elaborate on that. And Hynek saw something from a plane one time. People have attempted to discount this photograph he took of this. It looked like a plasma sort of thing. And I can't name any others right now off the top of my head, but I was quite surprised to find out they had seen something, which I think is what triggered them to want to get into the subject. Yeah.
How fascinating! I mean, it is fascinating, and I think above and beyond anything, I think it's important to go out into a community and just document things, because how many people, that there's such a rich history there, and if each of us just did it in our own area and went out and interviewed people, I mean, even if it's not on UFOs, just some topic.
It could be other things as well. It's hard not to want to get into to restrain yourself from getting into ghosts or spirit manifestations or things like that. And sometimes I think there's sort of a crossover, or maybe there's a spectrum on which UFOs are part of this whole thing. It's kind of hard to do that. But, it's kind of funny. I'm working part-time as a caregiver, okay? And these are older folks who have problems, at their age. And I was with a man and wife, and his husband was in hospice. I was there to help him with hospice. And I mentioned about my interest in UFOs. Well, his wife, 85-year-old wife, he was 90. She said, well, yeah, we saw something. Let me draw you a picture. And she got a piece of paper and she drew what you would call a sort of a diamond arrangement of individual crescent-shaped objects, okay? So you might have 4 in the back and then 3 in the front and then 2 and then 1, like an arrowhead. And she drew them and she put a question mark and said, not sure if one was here, meaning for her memory at age 85, she couldn't quite remember. I said, you really saw these? And I talked to her where she saw them and the circumstances which she saw them. And I was kind of flabbergasted, because I said, were they birds? No, they weren't birds. They were silver colored and moving from the west to the east. She gave me some details about that. Well, after that, with other clients of mine, I brought the subject up, and more than a few times I get the same sort of thing. I saw this really strange light with my husband. It was coming slowly down the river. It wasn't on a ship's mast. It wasn't an airplane. It wasn't a star. And it became so uneasy. I said, let's go inside. They were out there fishing, okay, on the banks of the Hood Canal, which is there near Seattle. And I thought, they're the things that people hide, And you can start at home like that. I mean, just dig into your local areas, and you can do that and practice how to document things as well, how to write a good report.
That's fascinating. And again, that's, to me, just I love learning from other people. It's one reason I really enjoy having my business, is because I can, people come in here and first of all, they're going to exercise, but then they look around and, okay, you've got 1,000 UFO books. What's...
I think you've amassed quite a bit since I last talked.
Oh my gosh, I've got, a couple of thousand at least, books.
Yeah.
And then the periodicals, it's just off the chart, but it's so much fun to have that, and the Druffel files and other things.
The Druffel collection, I understood you were, you were blessed with
So,
getting those.
oh
Yeah,
my
that's
gosh, what
great.
a joy. And I love, it's like people come in and, you just because they see things in the environment, they open up about things or ask questions about things. And I find that fascinating. I just love hearing people's stories, whether
Oh
they're,
yeah, yeah. And I've heard other stories, like I mentioned, spiritual sorts of things from people, and I don't doubt that they obviously had an experience, and they haven't forgotten it. And it's always curious to think how long they've probably not told anyone about that. And someone came along and asked them, but didn't experience anything, and they open up about it. And so, yeah, document that sort of stuff. I did start collecting, and I still have a large bookshelf of this stuff on demons. Okay, demon possession and demons. Demonology
oh,
now is this huge subject,
right.
movie after movie after movie. And I used to watch some of those, and I prefer not to look at a horror film anymore. That's what they're doing with them. Variations upon themes and that sort of thing. But there's that strain of thought in UFO studies that these gray creatures, are demons. They're manifestations of demons. They're reported to walk through walls, and they have these hypnotic eyes, and they behave in ways, whatever. I mean, I'm not. I used to read a lot of these abduction books um, by what's his name, Bud Hopkins.
We were
Bud
talking
Hopkins.
about him
It's probably
for
worth
this little
reading
bit of
about
the show.
Hopkins. Yeah, a Bud Hopkins book is probably worth reading. I wouldn't read about the high-rise abduction case that he reported. Avoid that one. He named a whole bunch of witnesses. He said that UN and some UN ambassadors or people who were in the staffs of ambassadors in the UN saw this woman being levitated out of a window. They
Right.
never published it. This is the problem with anonymous sources. You have a real problem. But
Yeah, and yeah, I mean that was interesting in the first, like before you came on, Jack and I were talking about Hopkins and some things, and so that's a really interesting period of time in the history of the subject for sure.
yeah, he was on television a lot. I remember seeing Hopkins on there debating Philip Klass, who I mentioned a moment ago. The plasma theory, and became a big rage. Of course, Whitley Strieber. I guess it's pronounced Strieber. Is it Stryber?
Hmm.
Strieber.
Faber.
Whitley Strieber. Yeah. And I have problems with Whitley Strieber. You remember the Heaven's Gate
Yes,
group committed suicide, mass
yes.
suicide, basically. Um, Associated with that was because the leader of that group was talking about a comet. I can't remember the name of the comet. It was approaching.
Wasn't that the Hale Bop?
Yeah, Hellbop. And I actually got a letter back from Whitley Strieber because I think I wrote him about his view that there was a spaceship trailing the comet or was part of the comet, and he actually believed it, you know. And I thought, I'm glad I have his signature on the letter. Hope I can find it again
Wow.
because there's a lot of problems I have with so many accounts of so many things that he's experienced over the years. And of course, he got $1 million outright for the sale of communion. And then after that was a flurry of more books, must have been 4 or 5 more books that he cranked out. And before communion, he was writing horror novels.
Right, and I've actually really enjoyed some of his horror novels.
Oh, did you read them? I never
But
did read
Wolfen,
Wolf,
yeah, that
which
was
I assume was werewolves.
right. Yep.
Um,
And there was a movie that Albert Finney was in based on that book.
oh, really?
Hmm.
Okay. Um, so the thing I have with him in terms of abductions is that was he really abducted? I suppose it's possible. Uh, that is possible, but there's some contradictions in his book, which maybe if I ever back on, I can actually tell you what they are. I wrote a little paper on that where his wife and he completely disagreed on something critical to the story. And I thought, that's seems to me pretty critical. Why aren't they disagreeing on something? And if you look at her own memories of what happened during that night at the cabin and other things, there doesn't seem to be a lot of strong evidence that anything really occurred that was supportive of his story, you know. Because if you're living with a writer who's talking about various fantasy books or other things they're writing, and who knows what discussions they have, I guess after a while the other spouse might start to really believe those things. I don't know. Anyway.
Right. Well, that's a great point. Like if you surround yourself with people that are, potentially experiencing something or have that mindset, that's where your mind goes a lot of times. And so, but you do bring up a really great point about the fact that he had $1 million contract to write that book.
Yeah.
And, obviously because he was a well-known writer at that point in time, but that it is, like the contradictions in his stories over the years have been interesting. In the Hale.com and Heaven's Gate, that was that's an important issue to talk about. And I mean, from, what I remember, I think Courtney Brown, who was a remote viewer, and Art Bell were also involved in promoting that story as well.
Oh, they were. Art Bell was?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Art Bell said, I don't know if your audience knows who Art Bell was, but he was a very, very popular nighttime radio host who accepted calls from anybody and everybody, which some was questionable. But I remember he came across something that was published that he wrote or told someone that he had seen a black triangle there in Pahrump. I think that's the name where he was living. Is that in Nevada, Pahrump?
Mm-hmm. In fact, one of my listeners actually lives there. So
that's an interesting name. I guess maybe it's Indian or something. I don't know. But he wrote about how he saw this black triangle, a silent black triangle, pass over his house or something. And I thought, boy, I'd like to hear more about that, but I didn't hear him on the radio talking about it. But I'm not sure where we're going with this. I kind of lost track. It's so fascinating to talk
about. I don't know,
but
it's so much fun just to go different places and hear different stories.
Some of these players, because, again, there is a history, and hopefully, you're passing on some of this history yourself by interviewing people and preserving it. And in those interviews, hopefully your guests are articulating things about the subject and their knowledge base that can be, understood and might have use for another generation of people. Because the UFO subject doesn't die, doesn't it? Isn't that fascinating? It was this long dry period before 2017 in that New York Times article. It's like UFOs never even existed. And suddenly, boom, it's an explosion.
Well, and that's when you've got people that are larger than life characters whose backgrounds can't be verified, coming onto the scene and getting a little bit of the spotlight and things, and not acknowledging the history of the subject, which I find very fascinating. And not only that, they don't have an understanding of the subject or, the history of it, which is just fascinating to me. Somebody who's involved in, these behind the scenes programs for the government doesn't really understand what's going on. Fascinating.
Well, that book, UFOs and Government, just really pretty much blew me away because Swords and his team so meticulously cover the programs and controversies and people with photographs of military and intelligence people involved in this that struggled to try to understand it and dropped it and passed it on as a hot potato and everything like that. And as an average citizen wandering around during that period of time, 40s through, let's say, the 70s, we're not understanding that the government behind this, there are lots of people involved in this subject trying to come to grips with it. And that really interested me when I read the book. So when this new study began, the federal government now, it just intrigues me. What are they hiding? And it's very common to say. I think we should say that. What are they hiding? Why is it so darn difficult just to say this was seen at this place at this time, and we don't understand it? We already have reports ourselves that say this person saw this at this place and we don't understand it. We have Project Blue Book reports. There's 700 of them. Okay, they're available publicly now. So um, it's a subject that comes and kind of goes. Every once in a while I think, well, maybe there's a breakthrough that's going to happen, right?
Right.
With the involved in this, and I think, well, but the problem is, they talk about transparency. That's in one of their reports, or maybe one of their news conferences or press releases, and I still don't see that. You know, so if there is something known, let's put it this way: if they know now there's something you do not fully understand, we're back to the 40s, 50s, 60s up to present. And if they don't understand it, they need to tell the American public whether it is a threat or it isn't a threat. Okay? They need to open up about it. And I don't know. Anna, on some late night show, I don't remember what, revealed that there's something that's there and we don't know what it is. I was reading this the other day, an article covering these statements. And he himself, doesn't he, in his library, have a whole bunch of UFO documents, I understand. I go to myself, well, why do you have all those things? Just maybe you sit down in front of a fireplace and start reading them with a glass of wine and enjoy the reports or something. Why do you have these?
Right.
So I really enjoy looking at the news to see how the government's advancing on this thing and see where it goes.
Right. It is fascinating. And I have to ask you, continue your thought. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm not sure what I was saying.
Okay, good. Well, then I will interrupt, and your train of thought is completely gone. But do you think over the decades, though, how important has the intelligence community been with steering the narrative on the subject?
It's hard to nail down who the intelligence community is. Now, we know the CIA was interested in this from the beginning. The early CIA, which came out of World War II. What was it called? The Office of Strategic Services or something, OSS. Wild Bill Donovan, I think his name was, who founded it. But there are, in Barry Greenwood's book, Clear Intent, now called UFO Conspiracy, as co-authored with Larry Fawcett. Mm-hmm. There's a chapter on CIA involvement. So I always ask myself, let's go back before 2017 and the New York Times article, and ask ourselves, was the CIA, Central Intelligence Agency, actively, either on a small budget or otherwise, continuing to monitor or collect reports from different sources? And we just don't know that. What about the FBI? What about the Department of Defense, the Defense Intelligence Agency, all these different intelligence and military groups? Were they doing that all this time? And why were they doing it? I don't think myself, until maybe starting now, because of the tensions between the U.S. and China and Russia, and the development of drones and other technologies, I don't really think that there's kind of a real organized effort on those agencies' parts to pursue this thing among themselves in a coordinated fashion. Now the federal government has ordered that all the agencies, intelligence and military and otherwise, wherever they can, need to adhere to a common standard of reporting. There needs to be a place to report what they have, and they need to dig up old reports in their files. That seemed to demonstrate to me that there probably wasn't some huge coordinated effort before 2004. That was the Nimitz, the Tic Tac thing. I just don't really think that. But, the efforts of Barry Greenwood and others to use the FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, and that's a book, by the way, since we're talking about classic books, you need to go get Now it's called UFO Conspiracy. It was once called Clear Intent.
Right. Right.
Get that off of you. Find it someplace. Okay. Again, it's Barry Greenwood and Larry Fossett, because I pick it up every once in a while to read these cables and reports, you know. And
A great book.
another book is the UFO Hynek Report, or the Hynek Report. I keep that by my bedside, so to speak, and I dig into it all the time and go back through these reports that he presented as being very, very good reports, especially some really good nocturnal light reports, which the ball of light thing kind of fits in that category.
I know. I love that. I mean, and you're going to have to come back on the show now that you're actually here and we got you in the show.
Yeah.
And things, and it's so good to see your face finally. But the ball of light. I mean, I love all of that. And in fact, I don't know where I put them, but I wanted to ask you really quickly to go back to that, but like with Paul Devereaux. And
Paul Devereaux, yeah, that book, yeah, I've got that, and he's looked at the balls of light and that sort of thing. He when he found out that examining the Earthlight Theory was out, I don't know why he did this, but he kind of felt that I was late to the game or something, and he had a scathing review of the book someplace. I've got it someplace. I think his heart's in the right place, and I'm not going to comment a lot about Paul Devereaux because he's written a ton of books. A lot of them have to do with megalithic sites and dolmens, those huge stones that are set into the earth in the United Kingdom, up in whatever, Scotland, Wales, England, that supposed to be like ley line sorts of things, the straight line UFO mystery. Manny Michel wrote a book, for instance, the straight line mystery, that the UFOs are being seen from place to place because of moving in. Okay. So we've gotten into that sort of thing. More Earth mysteries in general, I guess you would say, about Paul Devereaux. I don't know. He's a pretty old fellow now. I've seen a picture of him. Got a big, long white beard and looks pretty intense. I don't know. He always looks pretty intense. But
and I want to ask
there's
you
other branches, your viewers ought to know about. Go ahead.
I wanted to ask you too about James Bunnell and the Marfa Lights. So he did
the Marfa Lights.
Yeah.
Yeah, I talked to him on the phone and wrote a chapter for a book that I'm proposing to publish, so if I can ever finish it, and develop some graphics based upon some things he told me and little sketches he gave me. And that guy, he's not a ufologist per se.
No.
He was involved in the space programs in different levels as a chemical engineer. And he actually lived his childhood in Marfa. And he was taken out to look at the lights by his dad when he was a young kid. And he thinks maybe I saw something or not. He can't remember. But years later, he decided after retiring that he'd like to dig into the Marfa Lights mystery. So he went down there and spent, I think, 8 years or more setting up video cameras all over the place. He got the cooperation of ranchers and such to try to actually, document photographically, video and such, still photographs as well, this thing. And it's amazing. It's actually real that they're in there. By the way, they're reddish orange and flying at low level, many of them. He has tended to lean toward that it is more of a tectonic, earthquake strain sort of phenomenon. And he's related a little bit to oil in the area.
That's interesting.
West Texas has a lot of oil, although
Right.
I think it's more up between the Panhandle and I'm trying to remember the towns, whatever. It's big Cambrian oil deposits are in Texas, huge. So, but yeah, I've tried to condense his work down to a chapter because the book I want to finally finish looks at these areas and all the commonalities. Again, the lights, the shapes, the colors, the motions, call them kinematics or whatever, everything. And maybe someone would find it useful. Now, I'd like to mention one thing because I'm getting on a high here. In Levelland, Texas, 1957, people should read about Levelland, Texas, one of the classic UFO cases never explained. There were multiple independent witnesses in Levelland who saw orange, oval-shaped objects that were huge. They would cover the span of a road, which I think might be, 20 feet wide or something like that. And they would either vanish or ascend rapidly at a high velocity into the atmosphere and vanish. I'm going, oil. Oil is there in Levelland. It's a huge oil field. And I've got maps of the oil fields, and I'm trying to correlate where these things have been seen physically with the oil deposits. But no one's proved, or I don't have, or I should say that, any records on any major earthquake strain or activity in that oil producing area. Most of it is up in the upper panhandle and southwest Oklahoma into Texas, okay? But fracking occurs in oil producing areas, as you're aware, right? Pumping liquid under pressure into the earth to try to break rock and extract oil and that sort of thing. And there's earthquake activity as a result of fracking. So that's kind of a new insight I think I have about Levelland. But
that is so cool. And Barry Green, Barry, that's his favorite case.
Oh, is it Barry Greenwood's favorite?
Yep. He's been on the show many times, and he has talked about that case.
Levelland. Very well documented. He has a lot of photographs, I think, of Sheriff Clem. I think it was his name, Clem Weir. What is that? And some other officers and the witnesses, a number of witnesses that take photographs of them as well. But now that's a case that beginners ought to read about really thoroughly. And Michael Swords was very kind to send me a massive material on Levelland, clippings, and it must be 6 inches thick. Okay.
Oh, wow.
This thing. And I've gleaned from it whatever I can. And but they're orange though. Isn't that interesting? Orange, but they're not small balls or medium size. Let's say medium size is 10 feet or larger fit. They're more ovals. Okay. And they're sitting on the road. They're not floating up, slowly meandering around. They're sitting there and then taking off. So red-orange light is what really intrigues me with some of these objects. What does red-orange light mean? And that's why I've been digging into plasma and plasma formation in depth and trying to become a chemistry professor and a physicist dealing with atoms and how atoms and how electrons and protons and things like that cause plasmas. And I've been struggling to write this chapter that I'm trying to simplify it as much as I can because, it's actually fairly complex to create a plasma, which, by the way, has been in the news recently. The nuclear industry someplace has managed to create a fusion experiment, I guess you might call it, or prove that fusion can happen within a container and contain it because it's highly energetic to produce unlimited amounts of electrical power. And I found that fascinating because I was already reading about plasmas, which is the fourth state of matter. Of course, the chemists that are listening to me already know this. And the sun is a huge fusion machine. Hydrogen is being converted into helium. And in the process of converting that under massive pressure and gravitational forces, what's happening is photons are being emitted. Photons is light, and that's where it comes. And so the ball of light thing for me, sounds like it spans a natural phenomenon, but something not always natural, because huge orange ovals on roads taking off all over Levelland. It just, to me, and there was no storms in the area because the Air Force said, must be ball lightning. But Hynek looked into that. There was no storm sufficient to generate electrical activity that would create plasmas. So anyway, I'm rambling here. I'm sorry.
I know I'm totally right there with you. I'm going. I'm like, this is so cool because
You know,
I'm so, excited that you have spoken with James Bunnell.
yes.
He, to me, over the years, I mean, I love his view.
You
No,
ever managed to
nobody
talk to
even
him?
knows. No, I would love to. And he did. I remember almost 10 years ago, like buying a DVD that he had where he was taking, describing the equipment that he was using, the way he was doing field
Yeah,
research,
yeah,
and it was just so very. It was just intelligent and thoughtful and educational,
yeah. He's
and
a
he's a hidden gem in my opinion.
he's a scientist. You know.
Right.
Too bad. Maybe I can find a contact number for you, or maybe it's through a website. You might be able to reach the man. It'd be great to put him on.
Oh my
It's
gosh.
pretty easy to do, I learned. I dreaded coming on here. I thought, how many different buttons and things I got to do? And she's going to hear me when I talk, and do I need to?
But we
And
heard your
actually,
music.
I hate, I hate to sound computer illiterate, but the older I've become, as an editor writer, which I worked most of my adult life, I just wanted to do one thing: use a computer to create a Word file. It used to be Word Perfect in the old days.
Yep.
A Word file that I could edit and change and print and send to someone to lay out in a document. I couldn't care less about anything else. And I wouldn't say that I'm ignorant about what's going on with computers, but they're becoming simpler, I think, although you just need to find out sort of the process that creates the simplicity to get on with you. This is like pretty amazing. Huh? I didn't have to do much. A link, click on that, type my name, and go scroll down. Remember to scroll down, enter the studio.
Right. Right. And I just want to say, like Jim, who is staying up. I mean, it's very late or very early, wherever, I mean, you are in the world, but Jim is just a trooper. But he feels that Loveland was a military
Oh, okay.
test of some sort. What are your thoughts on that,
You're talking about Jim.
Morse? So he's in chat and he's always here and very.
Oh, I haven't. I don't know if I've seen him on your
So
program.
he's just no, he was on my show. He was great because somebody had not shown up and he was there and got on, and I really enjoy his comments in chat. But I mean, do you think that there was, with the Loveland, Texas case, could that have been military? Do you feel that was
Military. Well, I don't know what all the military bases are in were in Texas. Um, these ovals, they didn't seem to be like, no one saw like two together, like doing reconnaissance, flying over an area, hovering over, or approaching an automobile, or things like that. They're really short-lived. I don't know how long they were on the road until the witness saw them. Some witnesses were just driving and came upon one of them, and their engine stopped. The car stoppage, or the EM effect, the electromagnetic effect, which is really dramatic, which tells you something is being emitted by them. And then when they left, their engines would start again. The car engines would start again. That's the other really amazing component of that. So there actually was something there real. It could affect, engines, electrical circuitry, and that sort of thing. But the military, doesn't make any sense to me. I just don't see that. The Sputnik 2 had been launched I think the night before the Lebanon sightings happened. So the headlines at the time, there were two headlines on one of the papers. In larger type was Sputnik 2 launched, and then there was another headline right underneath it, something like strange things in Lebanon or something like that. And that caught the public's imagination because, we were entering the early space age at the time. Satellites, there are two of them now. Sputnik 1 and 2, I'm laughing because I remember as a kid actually going out there with my brother and looking at one of those things, a white dot.
Yeah.
And it did something to me. I can't remember my memory of what it did it to me, but I think it made me feeling more expansive. There's something that was opening up for me, But no, I would discount military level.
It's interesting. That would be a fascinating topic to have a few, people on a panel having a debate about that. And I want to just ask you, because there's a great question from Steve: would a plasma like ball lightning cause an electromagnetic pulse?
Electromagnetic pulse. I don't think they would. Ball lightning, I don't think pulses. The thing with ball lightning is it's essentially lightning. It's electrons that are being confined within a magnetic shell, if you will, or a field, okay, for a period of time, and they're not pulsing out, waves of electrons, to my understanding. There's a bunch of papers I've been looking at. They're trying to explain it still.
Right.
There's more research being done on ball lightning than there ever has been done before. And they're typically ball lightning is short-lived. It's only hanging around for a few seconds to a minute or two, and it kind of floats around and explodes or enters a house sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But if he's thinking about electromagnetic pulse, weapon, not that he is, but that idea, control pulses, I would say that's pretty random if it ever occurred in ball lightning. It's not like every second I'm going to emit a pulse.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for the great question, Steve, and thank you for answering. I mean, this is really fascinating. Like, I've kept you over the showtime, but whatever. You started a half an hour late. I don't care.
We should make sure we fulfill the full show.
No, this is like,
I'm energy left.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I'm like, there's so many questions I have for you, and I know that, you've worked on, you've been working on projects, and hopefully they will get out to the public at some point in time.
Yeah, I've been looking at Kenneth Arnold, but we'll not talk about that right now. I think you and I agreed that
right, yeah,
we had to wait a while.
Okay, yeah, that's
I've done a lot of research on him.
Right, you have, absolutely.
I guess everyone knows who Kenneth Arnold was. I think I sent you a picture of him.
I did not get
that's okay.
that. But
he can find it. He can find his picture on the internet.
Yeah,
but he ushered in. It's usually this is the phrase. He ushered in the modern era of UFO sightings. Modern implying there was one before the modern era, but those are older reports and not as well investigated. Going back to ancient times, But anyway, he saw those 9 discs near Mount Rainier on June 4th, 1947. It changed his life. I mean, very dramatically changed his life. But maybe in the future we could talk about that.
Yeah, I hope so. Absolutely. But so when is your next project about the ball of light, about your studies in specific areas?
I don't know. I'm working part-time, which really means full-time because I have to drive to these locations to help these clients, and my age is kind of catching up a little bit with me. And for some darn reason, I keep getting hooked on Netflix. And there's some really good stuff out there, like All Quiet on the Western Front, which
I haven't seen that forever.
You ought to watch it. It's Oscar nominated on many levels. It's the most dramatic, real depiction of that war, which I've read about. They show other things that World War I was known for. The invention and use of tanks for the first time, flamethrowers, mustard gas, terrible war, just horrible. And it's depicted as, I won't tell you the whole story. Some young guys, Germans, go into it feeling at 17 they're going to do a wonderful thing. It's going to be fun. Well, at the end of the movie, you find out it wasn't fun. Anyway, there's lots of stuff on Netflix. So
when was that movie? I mean, that's an old movie.
Well, there is an old movie, but this is a new movie. This
Okay.
I don't know when this was probably produced. I think it's been out for about 2 years.
Okay.
And it's German made with, get the subtitles and the dubbing or whatever. But I was really blown away about that.
Wow.
Unsolved Mysteries, by the way, has had recently, which you can get on Netflix, a couple of pieces on UFOs.
I've heard that.
Yeah.
In fact, one of my friends here told me, "Oh, you've got to watch this," and I'm just like, "Oh, I don't know if I can watch anything."
But there's so much, but they were really very well done. I would recommend if you got Netflix to find Unsolved Mysteries. I don't know which episodes they were, but
I'm watching Vikings right now. I'm in a Viking.
Oh,
I know.
okay.
I don't
I
know what it
watched
is.
one called The Last Civilization. I can't remember. It's all about um, fighting, in Vikings that were invading England,
Oh,
and it's very graphic, and how they it goes on for like 12 episodes or something. I got hooked on that.
oh,
The violence is
dear.
very graphic, but it shows how they fought wars back then.
Wow.
The
That
Last
sounds
Kingdom. That's it.
fascinating.
The Last Kingdom.
Okay, okay.
Last Kingdom.
Well, clearly that's what I'll be doing tonight. I could watch like a lighthearted comedy,
Well,
or
that's
just
yeah. You
what?
need you need,
No.
you need something opposing the the blood and gore things that are too much prevalent. I think.
Yeah, no, but that is fascinating, and it's just been. Oh, and I want to ask you because Yakima UAP 222 wants me to ask you if you've heard of Chris Bledsoe's incident.
Chris, what's his
Bledsoe.
last name?
Bledsoe?
Bledsoe.
Yes. And he had an incident. In fact, he was on my show a million years ago, and he did the last interview before he went quiet for several years. And his case was investigated by MUFON, and they went in. James Carrion was involved in investigating that case, and they went in and did a show about that, and allegedly kind of ambushed his family. Chris has over the years has claimed to see and film uh, orbs and many different things,
Wow.
creatures in his backyard. Um,
I'd like to look at
he's
that.
Yeah, it's a really interesting case, and he's friends with John Alexander and Tom DeLonge and that crew. So that's really interesting. Lots
Yeah.
of moving parts to that one.
And that occurred, Chris's experience in Yakima.
He is back in North Carolina.
But where did the experiences happen?
I believe in North Carolina, in his home.
Oh,
Around
in
his
North
home.
Carolina.
Yeah, yeah.
But I don't know where I came up with the Yakima connection.
So no, because I'm changing the subject a million times. But anyway, so you haven't heard of
No, I
him?
haven't. I got to look that up. Wherever balls of light appear, I think it's worth looking at those cases.
Yeah,
Because I
I mean,
remember.
I would say stick with Marfa.
Well, there are things that I tend to want to, you know, yeah. What I'm trying to say.
Was I subtle
More
on that one?
science oriented, where like Harley Rutledge was a scientist.
Right, right.
James Bonnell's an engineer and scientist. And Frank Salisbury in Utah was a scientist, And Bill Vogel was not a scientist, but he was a serious concerted investigator. And very solid guy, and he collected all kinds of stuff. So that's one of my criteria in this future book is to make certain these are areas where there have been multiple witnesses, police, when possible, consistency in terms of the shape of the object, colors and behaviors, and any geologic, topographic, or other environmental factors in those areas, and see what the interconnections are, among them, It would disappoint if it would disappoint. I think hard nuts and bolts people would find it boring because they would say, well, it's what's called Earthlights, just some energy floating around. We're more interested in triangles, discs, things approaching aircraft, tic-tacs, that kind of thing. But I think it's worth doing the research anyway.
Oh, totally. I think it's so fascinating. I've always loved that. And that's why I think that I reached out to you to begin with. And so if you, I'm sure many times you've spoken with David Akers.
Well, through email mostly. He's a pretty private guy. Lately, I understand I'm not going to say that he's ill, but the word is he's not feeling very well. I think he's older than me. His files hopefully will be preserved. I did talk to him a couple of times. I talked to him in person and interviewed him. And I
Oh,
think I might have called him once, but I've emailed him, and one of his emails was sort of teased me a little bit, but he didn't amplify on it that he had been on the reservation, and he said something like, "The activity has moved from here to here, two different places. The activity." So I'm going, Dave, can you tell me what the activity is that's moving? And he wouldn't answer.
interesting. I mean,
So,
I had maybe 6, 7 years ago, I had a conversation with him, and that
oh,
was really, really cool. I need to go back through my files, and look, because my files are, I've got quite a few of my own files,
yeah,
actually. Someday somebody's going to have a good time with those. But, that was an interesting conversation, and talk about somebody that did get out there and has done a great deal of field work over the years. It's
yeah.
fascinating. Man,
He's a
that's
civil engineer. He works as a civil engineer. I think he owned his own little company or something like that, from what I can figure out. And I was really, when I met him, he was clear. He was very cautious and quiet spoken, and he's written several reports that I think are available on the internet. If you look it up, you can find them. They're there. He typed them all up and talks about what he did. And he started a project called the Bill Vogel Study. Now, Bill Vogel was the chief fire control officer, and he named it after Bill Vogel. Bill Vogel had passed away, so to continue his name, he did that, and he ran that for a period of time. And I think I saw him one time on a YouTube documentary about Hestelin. He went to Hestelin, and I think he said a couple of words, but he didn't say very much. And of course, that's another area, Hestelin, that kind of conforms to the ball of light sort of thing. But I'm confining my book to the United States. I mean, worldwide, I got a lot of reports from different places, like South Africa had a whole bunch of balls of light, orange ones people don't know about, I don't think. And,
that is so cool.
Tasmania, believe it or not, Tasmania.
You've
Report after report.
you've reignited my love of this. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's just
Well, I think we're like-minded. We're really curious. We're excited about this thing, and we like to put the effort into it. And the more you put into it, the more surprises you get. It's just like kind of like Christmas in a way. Gift after gift of interesting reports and people.
oh yeah,
Strange people are okay. They're fun. They're entertaining on their level, but people who are really serious, it's great to meet them, and talk to them. And I think you're doing a great service with your program. I know you've come a long way with this thing. Um, I know it is. I didn't
thank
follow
you.
the detail, but I could see that you were expanding and growing it and making it more available, and that's really good. Sounds like you're really working to achieve a dream here, and that's terrific.
Thank you. I think the one great love, like I said, even if I can't, I mean, even if all of us are probably never going to understand if or what is going on, even though we're trying. But the biggest gift for me has literally been interviewing people like yourself and Barry, and just having these conversations, and preserving that. Like, that to me, if I do nothing else, like, that is a great achievement, and I feel really, I feel blessed in a way to have that experience and to
Well, it's a
keep
great,
doing it.
yeah, you've got a great role in your life to do this. And like I said, if you can preserve all of this in different places, and because time goes by and we leave what we can behind that's going to help people, contribute to knowledge and understanding. It's great.
Thank you.
So, but you do it so much, I can't follow them all.
I
You
need to
do
do
this
like the
week.
best of,
You do,
and
that sounds
but
negative. That sounds negative. But what I meant is, you do them. There's so many to choose from to
it's
watch.
yeah, I mean, gosh, it's been almost a decade now,
Is
and
that
almost
the
every Friday night, and
wow?
yeah, I love it, I love it, even though sometimes I'm like, okay, I'm, tired tonight, or this is going on in the personal life and things, but I get on, and I talk to people, and I love it. It's just cool. So thank you
Yeah.
for coming on the show, and I really have enjoyed talking with you over the years and learning from you, and thank you for sharing some of the things that you've collected in your life, because as a person that's coming into this, a younger researcher, that it's really important to have people like yourself who care about giving knowledge to somebody who's coming into the subject. And I think we need more people like that. And I really appreciate and respect that you've done that over the years, especially
Well,
with
thank
me.
you. Thank you for the kind words.
Yeah,
Kind
absolutely.
words.
So,
Hopefully we can talk again in the future. I'd love it.
oh, I have a feeling that we will. Now that we've reconnected after
Yeah.
a little time there, we both went through things, but I'm really excited to have you back. So now that we've got the technical things figured out, we'll make it happen sooner than later. And hopefully you can get your book published again. So,
Yep.
and
Yep.
good luck on the new book. We'll have to have more conversations about that.
Yep.
So plan on coming back in the next, couple months.
Okay, be great. All right.
Okay.
Be glad to be back. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll talk soon.
Okay. You too.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye. So again, thank you for listening to the show. Thank you for your great comments. I want to thank Jack Brewer for coming on the first half an hour. He again, leaves a lot of threads that we need to talk about on a later date, which we know he'll be back again and again. Again, you can go to expandingfrontiersresearch.org to check out the work that we are doing with our nonprofit. You can also go there to donate so we can do FOIA requests, so we can continue our research, and not only that, so we can buy equipment that will help us preserve what I have here, which is an important part of history. Whether you believe in UFOs or not, this is a really important part of history. I love having the opportunity to do that, and I want to just thank everybody. Thanks, Drew. Thanks, Simon, Peter, Steve, all of you, Ruoden. Thank you, guys. And Michael, I really enjoy your comments as well. So thank you all. And Tracy, I know you signed off earlier, but hopefully we can connect soon. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I will be back next Friday. I'm not really sure who's coming on the show yet. You know me, I'm kind of a last minute sort of girl, but that keeps things interesting. So you guys be safe. Have a wonderful weekend, and I will catch you next week, next Friday. So hopefully, we can end the show. I'm sure I'll continue to film and for the next hour, and you'll hear behind the scenes with Erica Lukes. That could be exciting. So good night, you guys. Take care.